acknowledges with respect. The land we are on today is a traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples.
This is also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native nations.
We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it.
As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the highest nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed.
CSU is a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion.
And significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built upon.
This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment.
Today's presentation is a step in a longer journey. For several years, students in the school have elevated various aspects of concern about diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice within our school. These students have generously, sorry, are we okay? Yeah. Do we have the subtitles on? The subtitles? Oh. How do you do that? We had an idea of how, Lauren, we've got, okay. The subtitles are on for our, I know for our distance. Okay, great. Today's presentation is a step in a longer journey. For several years, students in the school have elevated various aspects of concern about diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice within our school. These students have generously given up their time, perspective, and lived experiences to help us recognize the need to change from within. As social workers, educators, and scientists, we understand the need to engage in planful and inclusive change. In our classes, we teach the plan change process, which includes the steps of needs assessment, planning, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and maintenance. Today's discussion reflects the findings from the first step, the needs assessment. This year-long assessment was made possible by the work of many stakeholders within our school, especially the members of the Committee for Social Justice. In order to ensure objectivity and confidentiality, we've also engaged and very much appreciate the Social Work Research Center for data analysis consulting and our partners at Diversity, led by Dr. Mendez Shantis. Additionally, we have support from our school director, Charlotte Bright, and received early advice from the Vice President's Office of Inclusive Excellence and Dr. Michelle Foster, Assistant Dean for DEIJ in the College of Health and Human Sciences. We recognize and thank the students and staff who've been willing to share their honest thoughts and experiences with us along the way. This needs assessment has required all of us to dig deep in terms of vulnerability. Even being here today is an act of both vulnerability and bravery. Often people refer to large projects as labors of love. This assessment is a demonstration of love for our school community and every one of its members. Our being here symbolizes the commitment to ongoing work that will make the CSU School of Social Work a place where love and belonging are fused to learning, research, and service. On behalf of the Committee for Social Justice, I express deepest thanks for your presence here today. As we prepare to begin, I have some housekeeping and information for you. Okay. All right. So first, please note that we are recording this presentation and we will share it as well as the slide deck on the school's website, perhaps tomorrow, but maybe early into next week. So everything presented here today will be available. Secondly, there will be a much larger, more extensive written report containing all of our results that will be shared out in and that will also be made available on the school's website. Lastly, we want to acknowledge we have a lot of data to share today that's extremely valuable and not a lot of time to be together in this room. We're committed to the highest degree of transparency about the process and the method, and we're committed to answering any questions you might have about those methods. But given the brevity of our time together, we ask that you make note of any methodological questions you have on the yellow sticky notes that are on tables as those arise for you. And you can submit those to Kate Blackwaters, who will assemble a question and answer document that we will share with the community. So you'll get to see everyone's questions, all of the answers when we make the report available. If you prefer, you can also email or schedule a conversation with the contacts on this slide. So any questions about the overall needs assessment, the process, questions that you might have for Dr. Liz and team, those can come to me. Secondary data, those can go to Quinn. The quantitative data analysis from the student assessment, those can go to Sunil. You'll meet all these folks in just a moment. Any questions about the BSW syllabi assessment or the white supremacy culture assessment can go to Riley or Kate. And as you can see, you will hear from many different individuals today sharing the various aspects of our findings and leading us in reflecting on their meeting. First, you'll hear from Dr. Liz Mendez-Shannon, who's been an incredible partner in our journey this year and leads Diversity Campus Consulting. She will share guidelines for our discussion today, as well as the findings of focus groups and interviews conducted with students and staff. Quinn Hayfin, PhD student and member of the CSJ, will share context and lessons learned from existing sources of data. Sunil Butler, our consulting data analyst with the Social Work Research Center, will present the results of the student assessment conducted in the spring 2020 semester. So very recent breaking data. Sunil's exhausted. You will also hear from students Riley Smith and Kate Peters, who have engaged in experiential learning to apply the findings of their academic pursuits in meaningful and valuable ways to our school. Finally, School Director Charlotte Bright will leave us with next steps and closing remarks. So with that, I now turn it over to Dr. Liz.
Thank you. Thank you.
For today.
Can I move or do I need to stand in a certain place?
You can move.
Thank you. Great. So I'm excited that we are here, lots on our hearts, so we can are able and share to be in your presence and to honor what we've heard and what we felt in our hearts. And in order to acknowledge and to be able to have the honor of our process as a group, we have some agreements. These are the same agreements that we talked about during the interview process or the small groups. And it's a way to guide our discussion. Now, there's going to be times that you'll hear some content that it'll be like, really here? Or like, finally, it's being said. So it's two ways to hear information. These agreements are not just to engage and enrich your thinking part, it's also meant to acknowledge your feeling part. The part where sometimes, whether it be thinking or feeling, it's so difficult to merge and be a professional with that amount of information. So the 4 agreements start with stay engaged. Okay, I shared with this in the interview as well. Sometimes, we're thinking about what we need to do at home, or I have to make a call, or oh my gosh, I did not have a chance to grade this paper, or this is email. Try to stay engaged, especially when we talk about race, when we talk about the intimacies of what it feels like to not be seen, or to know that we are part of what it is to be seen. So experience discomfort, that is the biggest part. A lot of us tend to shy away from anything, either avoid conflict, my partner says everything goes under the carpet. No. Today, we are going to give ourselves that permission to engage there, to lean in, and to try this out if you haven't. And if you have, great, we need you here in this space to be able to be uncomfortable. And then speak your truth. Now, that's definitely, on Twitter, speak your truth. Essentially, it's really understanding that our identities have history in a system that upholds what is mainly and dominant. So it's about acknowledging that that's not the same for everyone. One size does not mean all. So finally, expect and accept non-closure. So I shared this with some folks. I'm the eldest in my family and I want closure. I'm a social worker. I'm here to find answers, right? And so it means hanging in uncertainty. We don't need to feel like, all right, we got this. It's like, what can I do? Lean on me. What do you need right now? So that's where we are. So those are our guidelines. Throughout this time here, you might be asked to, consider some of the data. Experience discomfort, stay engaged. Be aware, why do I want to leave? Why do I feel like I need to go to the bathroom? Why we're going to talk about this? So really understanding that. And then there'll be times too that we're going to have some activities. Go in, we're here today with the end of the semester, just do it, right? Go out strong, okay? Thank you. And now we have Quinn. Thanks.
Hi, y'all. Before I jump into the historical context and the secondary data, I wanted to point out that on the tables, you're going to see this double-sided sheet of paper that has resources listed. And this is specifically about the student diversity programs and services. We want to acknowledge that a lot of this is tough emotional work. And so there are reflection rooms just outside here that you can step into if you need some space to kind of reflect on what's happening. And then also there's multicultural counseling drop-in hours, and that's going to be downstairs almost directly below us. And that's from 1 to 4 p.m. today. And really the point of that is to get you situated, connected with community. And along those lines, the Student Diversity Program offices are open today until 5, as well as the Student Disability Center until 4:45. And their locations are on here, but basically they're outside the door to the left or downstairs to the left. Finally, there is an all-gender bathroom right outside there and other bathrooms as well. And if you have any questions come up throughout the presentation, anything that you really want to hold on to for later, jot it down on that sticky note and we'll get it to Casey. Cool. Okay, so we have a clicker. Nice. Can I just point at you? It'd be easier. Yeah, that works anyway. Cool. Do you want to go ahead to there's some different data that we are using for this. There's institutional data, specifically the Employee Climate Survey from 2018. Then there's the BSW and MSW program exit surveys. There's also student concerns that have been raised over the years. That's specifically what Paula was mentioning. We're going to start out with the institutional data, and then we'll go into what kinds of student concerns have been raised in order to bring about us all being here today. So with the employee climate assessment, we all understand the value of diversity. 94% agree with that. However, only 35.3% of school social work employees agreed that all employees felt included. And only 47% agreed that school social work recruits employees from a diverse set of backgrounds. Well, what about from recruiting to retaining? That goes down to 12.5% of school social work employees agree that we retain diverse employees. And only 18.8% of school social work employees believe that we treat all employees equitably. So when we're looking at all this information today, this isn't student concerns only. This isn't staff concerns only. It's not faculty concerns only. We're all in this together. We all see things that we can work on and we're figuring it out together. Looking at bias within the School of Social Work. School social work employees, 35.3% agree that bias is problematic among employees in our department. And that's only 23% in the College of Health and Human Sciences. So folks are sharing that there's more bias in the School of Social Work than across the College of Health and Human Sciences. And, oh, sorry, it was 35% at CSU. That was my error. And 41% in the School of Social Work. So it just keeps going up for us compared to other folks. And maybe there's a little more awareness of bias, and that might explain part of it. But we also want to be cognizant of, if everyone knows it's there, how can we address it? Looking at the BSW program exit survey, so this is the trend over time of whether or not the School of Social Work provides a learning environment in which respect for all persons is practiced, respects diversity and difference, and supports persons with diverse identities. And so looking at 2020 to 2021, 82% believe that respect for all persons is practiced. But that means that 10% don't. Whether we affirm and respect diversity and difference, 75% agree, 16% don't, 8% in the middle there. And then whether we support folks with diverse identities, this is the lowest one out of the three. That's 63% of BSW students agree with that, meaning that 20% don't. With this, you can see a trend over time that we got better until 2019, and then it went down again, which I don't have any explanation for. Students felt that, so there's qualitative insights too on the exit surveys. So there was like a comment box that folks could fill out. Students felt conversations and discussions regarding diversity were not challenged or addressed in depth. They indicated that faculty and staff were not trained well enough on diversity, and they indicated that they felt uncomfortable in the classroom and isolated in the program. So let's move to the MSW distance students. 75% agree respect for all persons is practiced, 72% agree there's respect for diversity and difference, and 62% agree that there's support for persons with diverse identities. So again, a little bit lower for the support of diverse identities. Qualitative insights, it's kind of similar to the BSW ones, more training needed, not enough challenging conversations around diversity, and being isolated and uncomfortable in classes and in the program. Going to the on-campus MSW program, we had a little bit lower numbers, a lot bit lower numbers. The School of Social Work provides a learning environment in which respect for all persons is practiced. 61%. 40%, almost 38.5, said no. The School of Social Work affirms and respects diversity and difference. 61.6 agreed with that. And whether we provide a learning environment that supports diverse identities, only 38.5% agreed with that. For the qualitative insights, we have some repetition again of similar themes, not enough challenging in-depth conversations around diversity. Students indicated challenges expressing opinions and viewpoints. That's a new one. Students indicated that curriculum is written with a white frame. And students stated that they didn't receive training on how to support clients with diverse identities. Okay, next one. So what about the action items for cisgender allies? That was really one of the first movements that students came through to bring all this to our attention. And I want to recognize Riley for being part of that. I was trying to figure out where Riley was. So the 4 action items were mandatory training resulting in school-wide policy and/or norms around pronouns. The Trans Alliance has been working on that the entire last year, and that was made into code. So good job, Trans Alliance. Add more LGBTQ+ authors and materials to the curriculum. Mandatory LGBTQ specific social work competency training for all staff and faculty. Shiloh got together with Pride Resource Center to put on a safe zone training for the department that lots of y'all were part of. And we're in talks with Dr. Foster to see how we can help support efforts across the College of Health and Human Sciences. And then hire more LGBTQ+ people at all levels. Other concerns that were brought out that same year was the MSW anti-racism group, which Milena was part of, and I was too. And those were the ideas that white identified authors are being used in a white dominant class environment. And that is a lot of white centering. So we're teaching white people how to work with people of color. there's intellectualization of these topics. So when we do talk about it, it's like theoretically, this is what would happen without recognizing the lived experiences. And there's a classroom environment in which students aren't feeling safe, pointing out when things aren't inclusive. More recently this year, the ideas and issues brought to the MSW program from current MSW students regarding the exclusion of people of color. They suggest that we compensate speakers of oppressed identities fairly. We create more transparency around the admission process and also the hiring of faculty and staff. We get more feedback from staff and students of color and create space for their voices to be heard, which is what we hope to do today. And we're more accountable to students about the departmental progress. There's also a need for greater accessibility. And so a lot of this came up with COVID. We're starting to dig into this more in our department. Increase accessibility of assigned information and materials, increase classroom accessibility. So that looks like providing a standing desk, detailing building resources like we did today. Where's the bathroom? Where's the elevators? Actually, I didn't say where the elevators are. I apologize. They're right over there. And allowing for options to attend class in person or online, depending on student health and safety. And increasing awareness of the Student Disability Center and Assistive Technology Center resources. So lots of historical data, lots of reasons to do this today. And from here, we're going to jump into the hard data. Lucky Cindy. Oh, actually, are we doing this one first? I'm sorry, I have the order wrong. We'll do the videos first from the students. My bad. Lots to keep track of. So first, we're going to be doing Riley's, and Riley is here with us today. We'll be doing Kate's video, and Kate is also here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Riley. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I'm an undergraduate student studying social work here at CSU, and today I will be presenting about my senior honors thesis on evaluating the BSW curriculum in the School of Social Work. Before I jump in, I wanted to offer folks a brief outline for where we will be going today. First, I'll describe my study, including the methodology, results, and discussion. Then I'll launch into some recommendations for students, faculty, and administrators, before ending with some final thoughts. So let's dive into the study. For my methodology, I primarily investigated BSW course syllabi. I only looked at required major specific courses, so social work courses. I did not examine electives nor all university core curriculum. And additionally, I only pulled syllabi from the fall 2021 and spring 2022 semesters. When I was examining these syllabi, I had a few targets in mind, first of which were required texts. There were 14 total texts between 13 courses. And I examined these texts for their author's racial identity by pulling images from university staff directories, online publication profiles, or if all else failed, online articles about the author. And I used visual cues to sort them into single identity categories. Additionally, I looked at assignments and sorted them into two categories. First of which were assignments that explicitly required students to engage with racialization and racism. And second were assignments that students could elect to engage with racialization or racism. This category fell into two subcategories. The first of which was when the topic of choice was left entirely up to the student who could then choose to focus on racialization or racism, or when racialization or racism was one choice among other diversity topics. For example, dismantling privilege and oppression has an assignment which requires students to examine 3 of their identities. So students could choose to focus on race, but they could also choose to focus on sexuality, gender, and ability status, for example. Lastly, I looked at invited voices rationale and the CSU land acknowledgement as surface level indicators of a commitment to anti-racism. So my findings for the fall 2021 semester in regard to required texts were that 26 out of 29 of the total authors and co-authors, which equates to around 90%, were perceivably white. Only 2 texts had perceivably POC authors or co-authors, and those were either Latinx or Asian. As for assignments, only 1 assignment from the fall 2021 semester required students to engage with race, racialization, or racism. All other courses had optional assignments, as I described earlier. For the spring 2022 semester, we saw no differences in required texts, so the same findings are replicated from the fall 2021 semester. As for assignments, however, no assignments require students to engage with race, racialization, or racism. And again, all other courses had optional assignments. So what does this mean? My primary finding is that the CSU BSW program is representative of social work education programs across the country. I also conducted a review of the literature, but simply just did not have time to cover it today. But my 3 findings here are in line with social work programs more broadly. First and foremost, majority of white authors means that we are employing a Eurocentric epistemology by centering whiteness in relation to all other ways of knowing and being. Second, a lack of required assignments means that there is an absence of content related to race, racialization, and racism throughout the curriculum. This could possibly be due to instructors' level of preparation and or their pedagogy, and it ultimately contributes to student hesitance or resistance to engaging with this content, or for marginalized students, it could contribute to a silencing effect where they are misheard, misinterpreted, or misunderstood. Lastly, the difference in the assignments between the fall 2021 and spring 22 semester being required could indicate that labor is being displaced onto individual students and instructors. However, anti-racism implicates institutions and systems such as the CSU School of Social Work. So by displacing the labor onto individual students and instructors, it ultimately means that we are not meeting the CSWE standard for engaging in diversity and difference. So, what are my recommendations? For students, it's important that they understand that education is co-constructed, and they must be expected to engage with race, racialization, and racism. Additionally, we need to support students by moving from marginality to mattering, to making sure our racialized students feel seen, heard, and valued. As for faculty, they require continued professional development to make sure that they are prepared and comfortable delivering content on race, racialization, and racism within the classroom. It's also important that they construct inclusive, vulnerable, and brave spaces within the classroom, not safe spaces which allow white students to sidestep their responsibility for racism. Lastly, they should employ critical race theory and other anti-racist pedagogies, which center the lived experiences of people of color and understand that racism is a modern day issue and that we do not live in a post-racial society as colorblind attitudes would have us believe. Lastly, for administrators, it's important that they recruit and retain diverse faculty, staff, and students. Hopefully the prior recommendations will lend itself to this. Second, it's important that they develop connections between faculty, staff, and students. This could be done between events, clubs, and organizations, just to make sure folks feel as if they are a part of a larger whole. Next, they should establish affinity spaces, which allow for the validation and healing for marginalized students. And then lastly, we need to integrate race, racialization, and racism content throughout the curriculum and not just relegate it to a single diversity course. So some final thoughts. My study is not without limitations. For example, I only examined the BSW program, which means we at future studies should focus on the MSW and PhD programs. And additionally, my perception of race is fallible and is not without error, especially considering I did not elect for the opportunity for folks to identify as mixed or multiracial. Additionally, there was minimal literature on recommendations in regards to course texts. This could mean that there is an educational or publication bias in effect, which is out of the CSU School of Social Work's hands. However, what is in their control is if we are to commit to the Invited Voices rationale statement and meet that with action, it means that there is a need to supplement texts with those by authors of color and to have critical discussions about these Eurocentric ideas presented by these textbooks written by white authors. Ultimately, the BSW program is needed in a curricular overhaul, and the time is now, given that the new education policy and accreditation standards are soon to come out. Thank you, and if you have any questions in regard to my work, feel free to contact me at my email. Hello, everyone. My name is Riley.
No, let's go for it.
My name is Kate Peters. My pronouns are they, them. Today I'm presenting on a project I completed as part of my communities class in my master's program alongside Stephen Harvey, Justin Smith, and Virginia Smith. In this project, we sought to understand the impacts of how white supremacy culture affects folks in our department through doing interviews. We are incredibly grateful to everyone who participated. Before I begin sharing our results, I want to acknowledge our positionality as 4 white students doing this work. Although we may have oppressed identities that are not always visible, that does not cancel out our privilege and therefore our inherent bias. Our whiteness enables us to engage with these systems with little to no repercussions, but we cannot fully comprehend the oppression of white supremacy due to our lived experiences. So let's get into it. What is white supremacy and white supremacy culture? Often when we're thinking about white supremacy, we're thinking about the extremists, the neo-Nazis, but white supremacy culture is more than that. It's more pervasive. It's a widespread ideology that's ingrained in us that teaches us that whiteness is valuable. It's the norm, both implicitly and explicitly. We use the work of Timla Okun to conceptualize how white supremacy culture could show up in our school, and based the questions we asked off the tenets listed. So what were some themes that we found? When asked about the quality of their relationships in the department, we found a lot of individual variation between participants. These relationships differ based on the role people play, the power dynamics at work, as well as the frequency they interact with someone. Because of these systemic factors impacting relationships, it can feel challenging to address harm that was caused. This is combined with the fact that we often have narrow expectations of what repair can look like. Our grievance processes are rarely spoken about, and we do not often consider why students might not feel safe enough to address conflict directly. This is an example of how one right way of doing things might show up. Accountability to ourselves and to others starts internally. This process is something that students seem to feel generally supported and even expected to grow with. But it can be more informal and sometimes even invisible with faculty. Several people noted that our department's initial reflex to mistakes is often defensiveness and denial, which can require extensive personal work to move through. When we discussed the department's ability to make space for people to be themselves, we found that folks often have to create informal support networks or actively seek out safer spaces, such as affinity groups. Both of these options are limited. This exclusion is consistent with the literature based about white supremacy in academia. Experiences of oppression are usually excluded in course material and may be tokenized inside and outside of the classroom. Our overall culture in the School of Social Work should ideally contribute to people feeling universally safer instead of isolated individually or as a group. When we think about how we can create an environment that accommodates diverse life experiences, we notice that students often have to engage in their own advocacy to receive support because there may not be formal structures or accessible structures for getting this. Faculty and staff need support in supporting students. This includes in giving students accommodations like closed captioning, providing students with case management services, such as more mental health options, as well as support for faculty's own well-being, both inside and outside of the school. Most of the people interviewed pointed out that they have heard how the School of Social Work cares about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but many struggle to articulate how this has been consistently demonstrated over time, if at all. Most of the examples of community inclusion and engagement were very recent, such as the Me and White Supremacy book groups, this needs assessment, and the beginning of a culture shift under our new director. So what can we do about this white supremacy culture? Well, interrupting white supremacy culture requires more than just a few bullet points, but these can be a good place to start. And one of those would be having more transparent communication and involvement between all the levels of the department. Our understanding of decision-making processes in the department varies greatly depending on the role we play, and overall students reported feeling left out of these processes. We need to create strategies for sharing information in a relational way, not just an email. Additionally, We need to think about how we can sustain others' engagement with these processes. When we're thinking about facilitating conversations with more folks, we also need to think about centering conversations around process, not just agendas. This allows space for emotions and feelings, which can be uncomfortable in a formal way, but are an important piece of vulnerability in building relationships. Measurable goals are important. However, they shouldn't be emphasized as the most important. We can also think about how we can be flexible with ways of teaching and demonstrating learning. This includes alternate assignment formats, not just papers and presentations, a variety of inclusive course materials, and instructors' overall ability to adapt to student needs. Additionally, we need to think about how we can have more routine feedback, not just of students evaluating faculty like through course surveys, but also of staff and faculty evaluating each other. This process should be ongoing too, not just for folks who are newer to the department. In conducting these feedback interviews or processes, we need to consider critical feedback and new ideas as well. Folks interviewed described feeling like their critiques of those with power or of the department as a whole have been viewed as threatening, inappropriate, or rude, which is a major piece of defensiveness in white supremacy culture. Lastly, we need to consider how we can bring our own anti-oppressive work out in public into group spaces. Many people interviewed described seeing colleagues do this work in private spaces, but it didn't translate into group settings. That could be due to a fear of conflict or right to comfort. However, it's super important to bring that into a group space and can be an important modeling tool for other colleagues and students. In conclusion, white supremacy is deeply embedded in our systems in a way that often goes unnoticed by those with privilege. Acknowledging its existence and impacts are an important first step, but we need to go beyond performative activism. We need to thoroughly consider how we can individually and collectively contribute to change and then take action. Thank you. My name is
Sure, it's me this time. Which way goes forward? Got it. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Sunil. I'm the data analyst at SWORK who did the quantitative analysis for the student needs presentation. My coworkers, Casey, Elena, and Lauren are, I almost got the name wrong. Did the qualitative analysis. There's going to be a slide provided separately that gives their positionality and everything, but we have a lot to cover, so we're just going to jump right in. So first, a little bit of background on this survey. The surveys were administered in class during class time. Classes were chosen such that everyone would have an opportunity to take the survey. Students who were absent from class and distance students were contacted through Canvas. For on-campus BSW and MSW students, the response rate was extremely high, fairly high for PhD students, and pretty low for distance students. I don't blame them. I didn't read Canvas either when I was in school. An independent analysis I conducted using school demographics and other information showed very little evidence of non-response bias, sampling bias, et cetera, particularly from a demographic perspective, except for distance students. So probably can't extrapolate most of these results to the experiences of distance students, but otherwise we're in good shape. So just to level set, I used mostly a multiple regression approach with interval-based testing. There were some more complex methods used when I needed to. Students, of course, have multiple intersecting and interacting identities, and that's always a challenge to account for. One of the concerns was sample size. A lot of identities in the school are represented in small numbers, which is a threat to their anonymity, as well as our ability to extrapolate reliable patterns. So one thing we did was aggregate groups that express similar concerns. This is not to say that those groups all have the same experiences, but rather here are some common challenges they face through the lens of the survey. And lastly, we conducted this with as much blindness as possible. I wrote out pretty much all my analyses plans, testing criteria, and everything before reading the content of the survey with only a couple adjustments for data anomalies. I was intentionally left in the dark about basically everything else on this presentation until I was done. That's not to say that I'm unbiased, almost nobody is, but this is about as good as we're gonna get. So I'm going to start by introducing the concept of these charts. We're going to see a lot of these in this presentation. Don't worry, some of them are going to get pretty detailed. Don't worry about absorbing every last thing. These slides are going to be available later. The full report's going to be available later. I'm going for general overall impression here. So these two charts show the responses to 2 questions on the survey. The first one is diverse racial identities are represented in course materials, class examples, discussions, and assignments. And the other one is about authorship by overall diversity of identity. And students were asked to rate their level of agreement from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So these lines, the y-axis, you can think of this as kind of like frequency. The higher the bar is, the more students gave this response, but this is through the eyes of the statistical model after the other variables have been controlled for. Essentially, what are we seeing? So for the overall student body, for racial identity in class examples and materials, agreement was by far the highest. It's kind of blocked there, but it's about 50% of students agreed. When it came to overall diversity of identity, a little over 40% of students agreed. Notice this bump here above disagree, though, about 35% of students disagreed. Now, the reason these types of things are useful is because we can look at subsets of the population. So let's look at this subset right here. This is a group that I call BIPOC/POC. These are Black students, Indigenous students, and a few other smaller racial groups that couldn't be represented because of anonymity concerns, but express similar concerns. For diverse racial representation in course material and examples, this distribution is a lot more flat. BIPOC and POC students were significantly less likely to agree and significantly more likely to strongly disagree. Nonetheless, agreement was the most common response, about 35%, but not by nearly as big a margin. Now, for overall diversity of identity, we actually see a significant variation right here. Disagree is the most common response among BIPOC and POC students, about 40%. We do still see relatively higher agree and strongly agree numbers than strongly disagree, but the divergence from the overall population is still substantial. These dashed lines indicate that the divergence from the overall mean is statistically significant. We're talking about a survey of all of the students almost in this college, so statistical significance isn't the be all end all, but it's still worth noting. Yeah, so next we're going to look at the rate at which students experience microaggressions. So students were asked how often they've experienced microaggressions, with the options being never, sometimes, and often. Students were most likely to report never experiencing microaggressions, particularly from instructors, 80%. About 20% reported experiencing microaggressions sometimes, and very few students reported experiencing them often. One group that diverged significantly is an aggregate group we're calling gender non-conforming students. These are students who do not identify as cisgender. This group was as likely to report experiencing microaggressions sometimes as never. This slope right here is not statistically significant, so it's about even, and significantly more likely to report experiencing microaggressions often, particularly the effect size is biggest for being from classmates. And again, the dotted lines here both indicate statistically significant divergence. All right, now this is one of those ones I was talking about where you're not going to be able to absorb everything here. It's we're just gonna, I'll give you the main takeaways. So students were asked to rate their level of financial stress on a scale from no stress at all to overwhelming stress. This big solid colored line here is the overall student body. And what we see is essentially a perfectly even curve. The most common response was average stress, a little bit skewed. You can see, I don't know if you can see, close up a little skewed to the right, but some stress and above average stress were very similar, and very few students reported experiencing no stress at all or overwhelming stress. This did not hold for all subgroups. So first of all, to revisit for BIPOC students and gender non-conforming students, the most common, that's these two lines right here, the most common response was above average stress. Notice that's a little higher than average stress. And the overall skew was to the right. For BIPOC students and first generation college students, they were, that's these two lines, the tan and red lines, they were significantly less likely to report experiencing some stress. Keep in mind, very few students at all reported experiencing no financial stress, can't really blame them. But another way to think about this is that BIPOC students and first generation students report experiencing at least average financial stress. Finally, students with disabilities, that's that light blue line here. This group, out of the groups that diverged in a significant way, was the closest to the overall group. But notice this bump right here. I don't know if you can see it through the other one, but there's a bump here at average stress and then another bump here at above average stress. there was a disproportionately large number of students with disabilities compared to the overall student body who reported above average stress, the takeaway there. And again, lot to look through here. You'll get the slides later. The takeaway is that all of these groups here reported experiencing higher levels of financial stress on average than the overall student body. So we're on our last 2 slides. How are we doing on time?
You're good.
Sweet.
Got
Okay.
6.5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Anyway.
You can be early too.
So this was the responses to the statement, I feel safe raising concerns about social justice, equity, inclusion, and or belonging. Now, the overwhelming majority of students overall agreed with the statement, almost 70%, and agreement was the most common response in every subgroup, but the rate at which this response rate dominated was significantly less among certain groups. So these 3 dotted lines here, first off, foreign-born students being students who are not born in the US, another aggregated group. Gender non-conforming students is the light blue line, and caregivers is the dark blue line, people who are the primary caretaker for someone. Those groups all were significantly less likely to agree and significantly more likely to disagree. BIPOC students and first-generation students, these 2 solid lines here were not, they didn't diverge in a statistically significant way. But I made a subjective assessment that it was worth including them on the plot, given the effect size and the sort of the nearness to the line of statistical significance. And yeah, again, there's a lot to look through here, particularly the way these tails interact is pretty interesting. But the takeaway is all of these groups were either close to significantly less likely to agree or significantly less likely to agree. We got one last slide here. This is for students who raised concerns about issues of social justice, equity, discrimination, or other issues to the department. It was about 60 students who said they had. And I forgot to say, like 290 students took the survey. I think that was the stat. But anyway, about 60 of them reported that they had reported an issue. And they were asked, A, how satisfied they were with the immediate faculty response, i.e. what did the faculty that brought the concern to say and how did they respond? And B, how satisfied were they with the actions taken as a result? So both of these are relatively even distributions. Responses ran the gamut here from very unsatisfied to very satisfied. But notice faculty response, and this was done by a statistical test, has what's called a right skew. In other words, while the distribution is relatively even, it is skewed towards the satisfied, very satisfied for the immediate faculty response. Conversely, levels of satisfaction with the actions taken had a left skew. It was skewed to the left towards unsatisfied and very unsatisfied. And this difference, again, as noted by the dotted line, is statistically significant. You can think of this, it's a little complicated, but you can think of it as analogous to a paired 2-sample t-test. Everyone who brought concerns forward answered both of these questions. So they were paired up, other variables were accounted for, and it was shown that the satisfaction with actions taken was significantly to the left of satisfaction with faculty response. And yeah, so anyway, these will all be available on the slides to look through. Feel free to ask me for questions. We'll also be releasing a more comprehensive report with more information, but I think I'm passing on to Melina now.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sunil. And it's great to see a lot of you here today who I haven't seen in person in so long. So that's really exciting. So when you see this, you might see a lot of text and panic a little bit, but don't worry, I'm not going to go through every single bullet point that's on here. I'm really just going to show you the overall themes that came from the student needs assessment. So this was the same survey that Quinn went around, and it's the same survey that we got the data that Sunil just showed from. And so you'll notice that a lot of the themes are very similar. This is a different data source, similar themes, so just adding another piece to the puzzle. So in the needs assessment, there was a qualitative question, and to provide some context, the reason why we included, one of the reasons we included a qualitative question was to help get a sense of what was going on, to then pass over to Dr. Liz and her team to kind of inform those focus groups and interviews a bit. And we did inform students that no faculty or staff who teach in the school would see their responses. So that's why you don't see any direct quotes on this slide. So what we asked was, what do you believe should be the top priorities for the School of Social Work in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and social justice? And themes fell into about 5 of them. So students felt that the school, like you've heard in other data sources, should prioritize recruiting, admitting, or hiring and maintaining diverse students and faculty and staff. And as you heard, admissions process was something that was brought up, and maybe looking at that and what barriers existed there, and having more transparency for new faculty and staff members who are coming on. And the vibe with that was just kind of wanting to know what people are walking into when they come into the department and seeing where are things at, what actions are being taken, that sort of thing. So the second theme was around expanding and updating courses and curricula. You heard a lovely presentation about the BSW curriculum. So similar ideas here. Students are wanting authors and speakers with these diverse identities, and they're wanting to center the lived experiences specifically for marginalized students within the classroom. And they also noted that there is that flavor of white saviorism in some of the curriculum that could be and should be addressed. So third, there was a focus on accessibility, safety, and inclusion, and they wrote about everything from structural accessibility, specifically in older buildings on campus. So a lot of folks said the education building has those gender neutral bathrooms. They have a lot of accessibility, but when social work students are in classes in other buildings, that becomes an issue. So everything from that structural accessibility to providing students with information on how they can file a complaint if they have one, and how we can ensure the safety of those students who do raise concerns. Fourth was providing financial support specifically for unpaid internships. And finally, students described a need for improved communication and school-wide processes. So some wrote about increased transparency about what's happening at that administrative level and wanting to know how they as students could participate in the decision-making processes or the action that's happening at that level. Many students expressed a need for the school to change how they address bias incidences on the larger CSU campus. So when those things happen on the big campus, students were saying, we feel like it's talked about, but we want to see more action behind just talking about it within the classroom. There's also a desire for clear accountability processes, which you did hear from other data sources, for students, faculty, and staff. And so I want to pause here and just say that there was an additional follow-up qualitative question related to students who did raise concerns to faculty or staff, and it asked them a bit about that experience. And so themes from that follow-up were that responses might have taken a long time, or there was no follow-up or action taken. Some students felt unsafe or unheard. And at times, school leadership was either unsupportive in their view or silent. Students wanted more clarity around how can I report a concern and what will the clear accountability process look like. And so, as I've said a million times, you'll notice that these themes align really, really well with some of the earlier data that Quinn presented, that Sunil presented. And so all of them together are kind of starting to tell this story. And so I'm really excited to pass the baton back over to Quinn, who will be doing a little bit of time to debrief because we knew we threw a lot of information at you all at once. So we can digest a little bit, and then we'll pass it over to Dr. Liz to kind of dig into that story a little bit more. So thanks for your attention. I'll pass it back over to Quinn.
Okay, I'm not sure about all of y'all, but I was getting a little antsy hearing all of that. And so what we'd like to do is split into groups of 3 to 4 people. And if you could have a little conversation about what findings most struck you from all of that information just presented. What themes did you notice across the different data sources? And what findings most resonated with your personal experience in the School of Social Work? How much time do we have?
We only have 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes it is. At the end of the 5 minutes, it would be great if you could use one of your note cards on your table to write down your key takeaways from this first section. We're gonna go ahead and do breakout rooms for people online. And so we're getting those set up right now. It will be random. You'll be set with 3 to 4 other people depending on how we can split up. If y'all want to just turn to people at your table, you can. We are gonna mute the owl while we're doing this so that we don't record people's private conversations.
And remember to write down any
Wrap up your conversations.
Yeah, I will actually.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
So if you could go ahead and jot down a takeaway if you haven't, from here,
Yes, we have a break.
we have a 10-minute break to run to the bathroom, stretch your legs, all things like that. And then we'll be jumping into Dr. Liz's presentation for the second half. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hi all.
30 seconds.
If you can start wrapping up and come back to your seats, please. If everyone can start wrapping up their conversations and find their seats, we'll get started in about 30 seconds-ish. Tight schedule. Thank you.
I still have like an LCD monitor I can draw from friends.
Oh, they just turned, it just like woke up, like.
Now it's looking weird.
Yeah.
Is it working now?
Yeah.
I used to look at the camera sometimes, but I could read where I would look at straight at my camera.
Oh, yeah.
I look straight at it, I could see people.
All right, y'all, we're gonna get started. Sorry for yelling. Thank
All right, welcome back. So I wanted just, earlier in the beginning, I wanted just to be clear about the agreements, but now I want to get a little bit more personal. So I'm Dr. Liz, hers Aya. I was born in another country. I'm a proud immigrant in Ecuador. I want to welcome everyone also on the Zoom. I know you're accessing this, but you are seen, you are heard. So if you have some questions, to put them in the chat, and we want to make sure that we're able to take them. When I thought about how we wanted to dive in, I wanted to explain the love that was arising when you do this work as a consultant. It's not like, checklist, a linear process. It's really being able to lean in and to listen. And as you do that, we were talking about this, we're usually hired for a needs assessment. We got to get into, the crossfire, and we have to wear our jackets because, we get it and we get engaged. So as we continue our presentation, we want to make sure that we are being very honest and authentic and follow the lead from the other presenters who were so brave and really, really amazing. So we will follow that way. And I want to introduce Dr. Brown, Dr. Dawn.
So I'm Dr. Dawn Matera-Bassett, and Liz and I were actually talking earlier about, how you have a day when your mouth and your brain aren't connecting well. So I'm having one of those days, and I've just learned you just go with it. So if a random word comes out, like my name's not Brown, you just go with it. It's all good, right? So I'm Dr. Dawn Matera-Bassett, she, hers, and I think I'm frequently coded as a white cisgendered hetero female. And I acknowledge that there's a lot of power that goes with those three identities. I'm also a first-generation college student who was born and raised overseas. So even though everybody thinks I have a North American story of how I identify and how I see the world, I actually don't. I was raised in a lot of developing countries and conflict zones. So that's a polite way of saying a lot of countries that were at war. I'm also otherly abled as well. So because I'm not disabled. I just have other ways that I navigate the world. So that's a little bit about what I bring in the room. And again, while I may have identities that have less privilege with them, I still think when I walk in a room, I come into a room with enormous amounts of privilege. And that's what's coded, and that's how I am. People are differential to that privilege because it's such a strong privilege in our culture, even though it shouldn't be. We all know that it is, right? So.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. So right now I'll wear my hat of my identity of who I am and my pride. And I want to share that I'm the first one in my family to finish high school, college, grad school, and the doctorate program. So that's why, gracias. So that's why when sometimes some people will say, is it Liz? I go, no, Dr. Liz, right? Because I gotta represent, right? So to welcome you into this room again and to really to share a part of my culture where we feel more welcomed and engaged, it would be great for everyone's to do introductions. In your triads, if you could turn to your left, right, or together, however you're comfortable, and really also introduce yourself. But let's not do titles. Let's not do, departments and the CVs online. Let's not do that. Let's be intersectional and purposeful, just like we just did. Follow our lead. How do you identify? What's, how are you here to show up? And everything is okay. It's all fine. So
if where you're sitting, you don't really have a left or right, just spin around, right? Because we are omnidirectional here. So please, as you feel comfortable, turn and introduce yourselves to your colleagues in the room.
Dr. Liz, 6 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes, for the breakout. Quinn? Yes. Thank you, Quinn.
Take about 6 minutes.
Finish it later.
I know.
Thank you for finishing up.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, what's, are we out of the breakout?
Yes.
Everybody back from breakout?
Are we all back?
You're good.
Great. So just want to acknowledge what that was like, who went first, and oh my gosh, how do I start this? Or I don't really know them, or thank God that they're in this group. How do I identify? Is it okay? Did I say enough? I should have, said more. Just want to honor that space. So I just want to now put on my hat for as a researcher, and we were tasked to do the scope of work, and I want to just identify, what that is, right? So we were told that we want some change here. We acknowledge that we need this, support, and it's a process. We need a needs assessment. We want to understand even more what's our culture? What are they saying? How do we know this to be true, right? We all say it inside, but as an external person, are you seeing that essentially, right? And if so, what are the assets? What are the strengths? How can we do this work? So what do you recommend? Essentially, that's been the ask. And in between those lines, in that quilt, the thread that puts it all together is that intention. It's that agreement that this is not only a performative experience, it's not a checklist, it's real intention and purpose. And we want it. I don't know that person behind. Next slide. Okay, so in a humble way, the task was to create these groups from students. Quinn is amazing and big lift. And yes. Calling you in, Quinn. And students from the survey in part one identified that they wanted to be in a general group or in affinity space, and then we were able to accommodate, and it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It was like very everywhere, but Quinn, of course, let's just do 3. And that's, and it helped really to mobilize all this want to share. And then we were able to also be able to interview staff and faculty, not just the one-on-one, but in dyads or groups. And then we also said, some folks may not really want to have this in person, face to face. So had an anonymous also these, narratives, and everything was a part of what we were able to collect, this, treasure of experiences and telling of stories that want to be told and heard. Next slide. So as we thought about what we've heard already in the presentations, we were like, wow, everyone is either hurting or really not aware yet. And so how do we, go in and not re-traumatize or re-trigger? How do we honor that space in a way that makes sense? So we decided to follow this type of a framework. And what I love about this CC is it centers race. It acknowledges that it's very difficult, but it also provides a pathway, a roadmap. It says, be authentic, stay true, accept non-closure. And again, it's in theory, but how does it come across in the experience, right? In social work, we always talk about, this is a theory, but how do we apply it? And then how do we know it's effective? So we started with the theory of interview guides, and we took a pause. What are we really asking here? What are we saying here? What do we want to know? Because I don't want to say, hey, have you ever experienced a racial incident? What is that? No, it's how do you define this concept? How do you how does it feel to be a part of this experience? So we decided this frame was really helpful. It identified educational equity. It talked about the differences between equity and equality. It asked for the interviewees, students, individuals, and staff, how do you, in your opinion, what is the structure or the mechanisms to make sure that this is happening? And then we talked about, which really was a shift, when you look at culture and where you come from, how are they assets? How does it show up? And probably 80% were very lost with that question. They were like, I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. It's like when you do a needs assessment and all you look at is the problems or the lack of or the gaps. This time we asked you to go to the other side and think about assets and strengths. How is that showing up? And it took some time to think about that, but it happened. And then we asked the question about what in professional workshops, in recruitments, what about the questions? What could be changed? How could it be asked? And in this type of a framework, it's called mindful inquiry. And in social work, right? That's our thing. We ask questions. We don't assume, but yes, we are very biased because we know bias, right? So the last end question was, what would it take so you're being heard, that you're being seen? What is the magic wand? What would happen? Like, what would it look like the following day, right? The magical question. And that was the place where I think we were like so connected with so many of these interview process. It was an emotional answer, especially if you have had to navigate the system constantly being ignored, or understand that I'm part of the privilege and how do I share my privilege and my power? So in so many ways, it was really, really rich. And so that's how we came to those, to our data.
So in speaking about our data, what we found really quickly were some real overt themes, right? And so for the qualitative researchers in the room, and actually we'll even talk to the quantitative researchers too, but it's those themes that really is what we're focusing on when we're looking at the narratives, when we're actually looking at the transcripts and seeing what's actually coming out. And it was pretty clear right away that there was an acknowledgement that we are a predominantly white institution. I'm guessing that's not a shock to people here, but that's within the culture, that's within the skew. It's part of what was already discussed in some of the other surveys and findings. And that the world, the educational experience within the School of Social Work, that whole framework is within a white lens. Very much a part of the entirety of the School of Social Work. And the question that came about from that was, and do I matter, right? So do I matter within this structure, and thinking about that, do I matter? That's pretty powerful, right? And that's one of those four, one of the four major needs that all human beings have. One of those four is belonging, right? So do I matter here? And then within that was a sense of, so if this is the world that we're in, and I'm not sure if I matter, there was also a clear sense of we have a mission or a vision or a goal. And that is, and it was also very loud. If there was a volume level, it would have been, I don't know. I'm thinking like, what's that hard rock, techno rock kind of thing? For me, back in my day, would have been like AC/DC, but for you all, that's like elevator music, so it doesn't count. But it very loudly was saying teaching to serve, right? That there was this commitment that people saw the vision, saw the purpose, that you all were here, that you were teaching people how to serve, right? So that there was this very much a humanitarian value around what we do. And also a sense of, show me how. If I'm going to teach people to serve, you have to, I don't know, right? But there was also a sense of, I know I don't know, help me, right? Show me how to do this. And show me how to do this in a way that situates diverse voices in the room, right? So don't have another white person tell me how a white person should show up in a room, right? So really having diverse voices in the room, and I think we'll get to quotes here in a minute, but there was one quote where somebody was talking about being in a room and having a presentation on race presented by white people to a room full of white people. And it was like, maybe we need some other perspectives on how voices show up and how different communities need their voices heard. So diverse voices were important. There was also a clear sense of acknowledging that there is a history, that's felt. And even for the newer people, there was a sense of there's something unspoken. So even if it's not spoken about, there was a clear acknowledgement of, even with what's not spoken, we know something's in the room. We don't know what it is, but there's a thing and there's rules, right? So, and for some of you all, you have been more engaged in the actual history at the time, right? In acknowledgement of that history was a commitment to how do we repair, and then how do we heal, right? So wanting to get to a place of repair and heal. And these were very loud themes, again, for me, BACBC, but very loud themes that came across very overtly. I mean, it was just, beyond saturation from the qualitative world. It was quite clear.
So that was the initial, initially that's what, we saw. And what is their bias? Like, are we seeing what we think because of the study and the outcomes? Are we seeing the same thing because it's really, prevalent? So we dug a little deeper. And so we are not identifying some themes that are only students, comparing them to the faculty and staff, because all of the themes that arose are the ones that we're presenting that were across everyone. So these are the top themes. In addition to what we just only talked about now, I want to share that what we've identified really fast after the dive is that education is inclusive. There were a lot of talks and quotes around how this is possible here. And this is our right, that education be inclusive, especially around accessibility. And that was really defined quite differently across all groups. But the bottom line and the heart of all this was, I want to feel welcomed. Whether I'm in the classroom, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm in my workspace, I want to feel welcomed. So then I describe these two arrows as what is hugging this process in our theme work and our coding. Is it holding us down? Is it trying to, launch us? But whatever it is, how we go next, it's holding us. And what it is, it's calling out and calling in. How do we do that? When we see it, how do we name it? How do we model it? How do we access any supports around this? Because there's a lot of pain around that. There's a lot of, bystanders who see what's going on and don't know how to engage. Maybe we're friends. Maybe it's hierarchical. How do we do this? And then, of course, we talked about PWI. The lens that we see through, it's there, but how do we navigate it, right? How do we use that power? Not just feel impacted. And then the denominator around this, which is around a timeline. Okay, we know this is identified now, but if we don't make this change here, this is not going to work. This is going to stay the same. So what was identified was, how do we hire in a way that's more equitable? What are the strategies for recruitment, not just for new faculty or staff, but for students? Where is that again? Accessibility. What is our branding around education is inclusive? How do we get there if this is not going to change, right? So this is the timeline of our future. And it really, really anchors how we lean into being able to adjust, change our teaching, our mentoring, and our shared values. So, thank you. So we're going to meet again and talk a bit. Thank you, Dr. Don. We have aggregated quotes and just to make sure they're not identifiable, but a lot of you have shared these quotes one way or another and across our studies. So these are just quotes on the one page. And if you could again turn to your group, read the quotes to yourself, and in your group, if you can choose one quote. And in your group, talk about why you're connected to it. Now I'm not saying to say, this is me, unless that's you, and you want to say that, but it's just, why are you connected to it? Maybe it's completely like, wow, this is so foreign to me, or this is interesting, I've seen this, or I connect with this very greatly. So being able to do that as you look at what's on the page. Okay. So take, how many minutes? 9 minutes. 11. 11 minutes. Yes, 11 minutes. And then if you have any questions, just call us over.
We're getting the breakout room.
Okay. Do they have,
Yeah.
does the breakout room have the sheet?
Yeah,
Okay,
I have an
don't-
online copy.
Where's the online copy?
I sent it to that email.
Yeah.
Y'all are also about halfway. Little over halfway.
Good.
Yes.
Is that an accurate time? Oh.
We got our little quick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
She just tells me to shut up.
We can do that.
Everybody's back now. Hope everyone's back. So what was it like doing that, right? We're social workers. We can process the processing of the processing. So what was it like doing that?
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
It was nice to connect with other people who I don't often get to talk to and feel that there is a connection around the collective thoughts moving forward.
Nice, good. So an appreciation about being able to do that, to being able to connect with others. Any other thoughts that came out about anything online? Do we have any things coming up in the chat, Katie, that let's acknowledge the online people and say, if you want to put something in the chat, feel free to. Anything else? It was wonderful to see you all talking together, right? And the energy in the room that just really went up. So that was really nice. And Katie, just let us know if we've got something coming up on the chat. So the next slide that they're going to queue up is going to talk a little bit about how all of these things intertwine or engage together, right? So assuming that what everybody said is true, which is there is a value around education being inclusive, and that there's a commitment and a desire for accessibility for everyone, and the importance of a feeling of people being welcome, all of them being welcome, right? So not just the parts of them that are pleasing to somebody, but all of them, right? And that by doing that, we can create understanding. There has to be this engagement, right? And this is much more of a reflexive process. This isn't just a one and done, right? So it isn't just show me how with diverse voices and I'll know how to teach to serve and I'm done, right? So this is really something that moves back and forth where you're going to show me how, we're going to make sure that the we is all of us showing each other how we do this. And that might mean that I'm thinking I've got it right. And then Dr. Liz is like, Dawn, so can we talk? So when I was saying this is actually what I was meaning. And when you said what you said, this is what I heard, which wasn't really what I was hoping you would understand from me, right? So that's that piece about understanding being important. So maybe there's multiple showings, right? Maybe it's one and done. Although I will tell you all, as a woman who shows up with a lot of privilege, I can be really dense. And it isn't one and done, right? And even if I'm showing up and I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to own my privilege and I'm trying to be aware of how I show up in the room, and that's beside my personality, right? My personality is already bombastic. Then you add the privilege on top. I'm a lot, right? So when somebody's working with me and talking with me and saying, you know, I'm quieter, Dawn, or getting real about these things, for me, this is gentle, and you kind of step on the tulips when you walk, and ouch, right? That it really can be a process of giving, right? I've had a faculty of color who I used to work with who said, I am so, I'll leave out the cuss word, sick and tired of teaching people. Why is it my job to teach them? Right? So it's a gift when somebody is coming to you and saying, I'm willing to show you, I'm willing to talk with you. That's a gift that they're giving those of us who hold privileged identities, right? Knowing that most of us in this room, if not all, I don't want to say all because I don't know, but most of us in this room have some sort of privilege of some kind, right? I mean, if nothing else, the access to CSU, the access to higher education, if nothing else. But being mindful of that, right? That it's a gift when somebody's willing to say, okay, are you going to get real with me? And you, Dawn, are you going to own your privilege? Are you going to own how you show up in the room with your personality and your society code of privileges? Are you going to own that? And are you really wanting to get real? And are you okay if I say not cool? Or are you going to use your privilege and power to step on that, right? So that's very much something that takes time, right? And I think that's part of what you all have been talking about, and you're talking about, wow, this is, if we're going to go here, this is going to take time. This is going to be a heavy lift. This is going to be work, because there has to be that reflexive relationship and a mutual willingness to be open, right? So we have to have this interchange of showing and hearing and teaching to make progress And that is anchored within a framework of hope, right? That there's tremendous hope, that there is going to be an awareness. We're going to take all of this forward, this understanding, this, told you words, this commitment, this philosophy of inclusivity, of accessibility. We're going to take all that forward. And with taking that forward, where we can recruit students, faculty, staff with diverse identities, right? And including in that, because part of our conversation was not, I mean, it's easy to say diverse identities, right? I told you all that I have identities that are not privileged identities. And yet I have to acknowledge that the privileged identities that I hold, that people code on me right away, is huge, right? So that what I'm saying in a nice, gentle way, which I'm now not going to be gentle because I'm going to step on the tulips, is that we have to say we are going to intentionally, we need faculty, we need students of diverse backgrounds, of diverse racial backgrounds, of diverse gender, of diverse sexual orientations, of diverse abilities, of diverse voices, right? And we can't just say, well, we've got one and we're good, right? And I'm not saying that you all would say that, but that's the struggle. And that can be a struggle within a larger institution, right? So that, and I'm not saying that you're EO people, but it can be that there's a sense of, well, we have this many across the university, and you're like, yeah, we're not really into checking a box. This is about how we really need to make sure we've got those voices working together. So how do we recruit? How do we hire? And then even more critically, how do we retain, right? Because if this is perceived as a hostile environment, this is perceived as a closed environment, even though I may be thinking, we're not hostile, we're not closed. You know, I got my one Latina friend, Dr. Liz, have you met her? She's great, right? So we're okay, but there has to be a perception that this is open, right? And that we're going to collaborate together. And again, so even though this is the hope, that by doing this, by having this philosophy, by having this framework that we believe in, and engaging in this reflexive process, we will end up being able to recruit and or hire. We will be able to collaborate across voices, and we will be able to follow our mission about teaching how to serve. That makes sense. So those were the hopes that people brought forward in our data.
Want to give an example of here, the collaboration. So a lot of folks really think like, you know, let's form a committee and let's try to talk about this, you know, topics, invite all the voices, you know, address conflict. Yes, let's go deeper. So I'm in a room with a colleague and we're doing a training, a workshop, and we have we read the instructions, and I read the instructions, and the room is pretty much 9 identifying as white, 1 is a person of color. And I read the instructions, and now I know I have an accent, but I don't think I have like a really bad accent. I think you can still understand me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're looking at me like, and I'm like, okay, I'll read it again. So I read it again, and still, and it wasn't like I was reading anything powerful. It wasn't a quote or anything. It was just instructions. So my colleague, who identifies as white, read the instructions. She was like, I got it. She read the instructions. Oh, okay. And they proceed. So what happened there? What happened there? So 10 years ago, I'd be like, you know what? Okay. You know, I'll be fine. If I was employed, I don't remember the front of the job. I mean, I thought she was my friend, and right. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna call her in. And so I said, so listen, the other day, and I was so nervous and anxious and like, oh my gosh, you know, I wonder how she's gonna take it. Meanwhile, I'm crying because I'm standing up. I'm going to be heard. I matter. So I went to her and said, okay, so you know, the other day, I don't know if you noticed this, but I read some instructions and the kids, nobody really got it, but then you did it. And then everybody got it. She said, I just explained you. That's what she said. And I said, yeah. And she goes, I need a moment. And I was like, okay. And she goes, I'm sorry. And I just want to say that that was not okay. And what can I do to make you feel better? And she turned the tides on me. I was ready to take care of her, right? That is what the system has taught me. I have to take care of my partners who are white. And she turned it on me. And I was like, what do I do? I was like, what do I need? A hug. I'm hurt. And she hugged me. And I felt healed. I cannot tell you the power that provided to be heard and taken care of. And so she was, and I know she was upset. I know it. I could see it in her face. She was holding her tears back. But that's collaboration. That's calling in. That's being present. Now, I'm sure she went home and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I love her. You know, that's not the question. We have bias. We have internalized our racism. We've been colonized. We know that we are at odds. So we're trying to do this work. This is when it matters, right? That's why students need to feel that action. That's why instructors and faculty and staff have to feel that power to be seen when they recommend certain things, when they want to be heard, right? When they need to make this change across the system. So I just wanted to provide that example.
So then within all of this, right? So then, as I always tell my students, from the very first day of class, it's your job to be asking me all the time, so what, right? So what do we do about it? So what does this mean? So from the data, so what? So what does this mean? So what are next steps, right? And ultimately the next steps are steps that you all collectively, collaboratively determine. Some things that we know from the literature, we know from practice models, we know from experiences, we're offering are potential things that you might consider that would work, okay? So one of the things that's helpful, probably because Liz and I were brainwashed into being educators, is training, right? So it's like, first, help me understand the words, then how to apply the words. And so part of what you all have seen today is some modeling of the courageous conversations. For those of you who were willing to give your time, and I'm clear, it was a gift of time. The most precious thing for me is don't waste my time. Anything else I can deal with, don't waste my time. You all gave the gift of time when you were in the interviews or the focus groups, right? So that hopefully was the beginning of opening the door of modeling those courageous conversations. But that would be one thing for you all to consider, and having them school-wide, right? Now, if I had a really big magic wand, wouldn't it be great if we could CSU-wide? But my magic wand isn't that big. It doesn't fit in my car when it's that big. So how do we do it within the school, right? We can own our community, okay? And then even looking at simulations, has anybody here actually participated in a real simulation? So simulations, the data shows us, the literature shows us that actually it's a great way of learning. Bell Hooks, for those of you familiar with her, talked about learning experientially is truly an authentic way of learning. But looking at having simulations and doing them so that you can actually learn in your body, not just in your head. And then looking at the intercultural development inventory, what we call the IDI. It's a model, it's an approach for both self-awareness, introspection, and introspection. And it involves the initial assessment, which is for our quant people in the room, got to represent, proven, reliable, and valid multiple times across multiple demographics. So across different populations, even internationally. So a really strong tool to use that involves both I understand more about myself and how I see the world and how I navigate the world, but then also provides coaching around, and if I want to go somewhere, how I develop a plan for where I want to be at some point, if I want to go on that journey, right? So then also looking at recruitment and hiring strategies. I'm going to pause for a second to get a drink of tea while Liz speaks.
And then I think we really did talk about that in the slide with the codes. I also want to spend some time on how we see being able to diversify opportunities that relate to your students. There's not just one that fits it all, right? It's not like, let's try to form even affinity spaces. You got to think about what type of affinity spaces will impact who or whom. I know for me, my experience has been sometimes as the students who identify as undocumented feel very afraid to be on the radar. And so maybe that group may be something around, what do we do after we graduate? What are some things that we know, especially within the research, but also with our students with their surveys, that will anchor them and that they want. So they have to be in that section. But lastly, there's so much out there about racial equity toolkits. And like I said, just like a theory, it's about how you apply them, how you look at them. And then to move even ahead of that, how are you accountable to that process? And then how are you going to measure that effectiveness? How do you know you're successful? You know, like we said, it's not just about recruiting, let's just say people of color, it's the retention of it as well. Why should they stay here? Why choose here? All right, so we are at the end. You made
Almost at
it.
the end.
Almost at the end. So we are asking to be able and to document this time in the history of the School of Social Work at CSU. So if you don't mind, and hopefully it works, it will, yes, Paul. You go here, go to that, or the QR code.
So that's poll everywhere, in case you all see no part with that. We thought it'd be great to get a word grab, sorry, I'm yelling right behind you. But to really grab the voices in the room and their perspectives.
Lauren, can you go back to the QR code for a minute?
Yeah.
And it's going to be open all day if you wanted to, you know, afterwards. And we'll create a word cloud that documents for today.
Is it capturing for you?
Yeah. Good. Yay. And then I will provide the word cloud to Quinn and Paula, and they can share it.
And if you want to skip your name, you can.
Yes. We're just here to coordinate too. It's not going and show up, so.
So there's that question there. So you're just going to use one word that represents what equity means to you. So we'll give you all just a couple minutes to do that real quick. If you have clumsy thumbs like me, you probably close the window. You might shoot it.
Maybe a lot of folks at the same time, probably.
Oh, it might be.
It just shows that they're under their
That's what's happening to us.
Oh, did you turn that into ordinance here? I'm gonna work on it.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Hi, neither.
I don't think it's.
It's not. Oh, it's a problem.
It's not
with
sponsored.
Maybe.
Yes.
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe you gotta have your
Computer?
Listen, I just want it noted that we did not have a tech problem until 2:13.
That's okay. So you know what? I apologize. We will do it ourselves, but let's not fear. If you could write your word on an index card for this, and we will populate it. Please, thank you.
We'll go analog and digital.
Same thing with the chat, if that's possible. Thank you. One word, just one word that represents what equity means to you, and we will create the word cloud. Thank you. You can pass it forward.
And decide which color matches blue for what.
Any color, because it's on the word cloud.
That's true.
Whatever.
Just one.
Done.
I don't know.
Great. Thank you for your flexibility. Sorry. Thank you.
Stancing again.
Oh, I like
that.
So do y'all remember in the very beginning, we asked you all to write on pieces of colored paper, and white is a color. But on a note card, write one word to describe one thing you need to feel safe. Because we had our conversation today. So things that people were wanting to experience was respect, support, trust, shutting down defensiveness, open communication, open-mindedness, Selah, which is an intentional pause or space for reflection, authenticity, honesty, caring, strong facilitation, active listening, welcoming, clear, friendly, space, familiarity, open door, restorative, justice policies. Sorry, bifocals kicking in. Inclusive environment where all identities are respected. Non-judgmental body language. Staff, faculty, and administrative accountability for past harms. Accountability, opportunities, calling in, feel safe through accountability and recognition of mistakes. So those are some of the things that you all asked for to feel safe. And one outcome that you'll hope to happen after we leave here today. A process and a plan to address what was found, community, progress, improved awareness, understanding, actionable steps for change, self-reflective, direction, better understanding, change, objectives, action, accountability, commitment to action, actionable next steps. Are we reaching saturation yet for the qualitative? A goal to work towards, accountability, community, reflection, optimism that we can make change and we will. Accountability, understanding, recognition, equitable processes, hope, structural changes for all faculty and staff within the School of Social Work. That's what you all are hoping will happen after today.
And thank you.
I feel a little overwhelmed at the idea of having the last word after everything they've heard today. So just take this as the last word of today's meeting that is an ongoing part of many, many more conversations, many, many more actions that we will have. I got to sit next to Dr. Michelle Foster for the first half of this, and some of you know Michelle as the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at the college. And she turned to me and said, I can't believe how many people are here. And in case you weren't aware, there were over 20 people attending virtually as well. And Michelle's comment was that it's a commitment that each of these people are making to focusing on equity and justice, to the culture and climate of the school. And so I am absolutely overwhelmed and impressed with that level of commitment and with seeing each of you here. So each of you here and those of you I haven't seen but felt online. My name is Charlotte. I've met many of you. I'm the director of the school. I use she and her pronouns. Today is an opportunity to reflect on where we are and where we're going. As we heard about past and ongoing harms and inequities, we were and will be pushed to acknowledge and address these concerns. We commit to continuing to listen, but also to initiating action. We must take ownership of the areas where we have fallen short and of the areas where we need to grow. We must support one another in intentional, thoughtful, responsible action. If we are feeling guilt or regret, we must not let that stop us from engaging in this work, but interpret that feeling as a signal that work is needed. Today is an opportunity for us to take a step forward in anti-racist and anti-oppressive work that seeks justice and liberation. One of the students who put all of this effort together for today introduced me to Lorraine Code's work on producing truth, which emphasizes the positionality of those whose narratives are more and less valued in the search for truth. Code uses the terms dismissed, discounted, and disbelieved to describe how individuals with less power in an institution are received. Today, by contrast, we strive to make student voices and other underappreciated voices believed and valued.
As we reflect on what we learned, and we've learned a lot today, we are digging into what our own parts of this process have been, and we are exploring what a restorative process could look like. With that in mind, as a leader of this school, I offer a sincere apology and acknowledgement for harm that members of our community have experienced. There are so many specifics that we heard, but I jotted down a few. Probably the biggest being the disparity in how white identifying individuals and people of color and how cishet individuals and members of the LGBTQ+ community have experienced our school in terms of its acceptance, welcoming, belonging, sorts of feelings. That is a harm that we need to really examine carefully and think about going forward. It's connected to issues of hiring, recruiting, retaining, supporting employees and students of diverse identities, with diverse identities, feelings of lack of safety, feelings of isolation and bias, gaps between our stated ideals and our actions. I know that I could go on, but I will stop from here and continue to absorb and reflect on some of the other pieces that we've heard. From here, we need to sit with and reflect on what we've learned. We need to create opportunities for repair. As we hear ourselves in the information that Diversity Compass, the Social Work Research Center, and students have shared, we can look to change our approach. Our future commitment continues the plan change process that Paula described at the beginning today. We commit to planning, to implementing change, to monitoring and evaluation, and to sustaining change and growth. There will be financial and human resources dedicated to these efforts, which are a top priority for the school. I commit to supporting not just individual, but also structural change in how we approach equity and justice work. This work is not the purview of just students, just staff, just faculty, or just administrators. It is all of our work, and we will stand together in community as we engage in the difficult work ahead. I will close with deep appreciation for Dr. Liz and Dr. Dawn and their colleagues at Diversity Compass, with appreciation for the Committee for Social Justice, the Social Work Research Center, the students who made improving our culture and climate a topic of their coursework or their research, and for all of you and all of those who aren't here today who shared of themselves in pursuit of a more just and equitable school of social work. I know I speak for our entire community in thanking you for shedding light on where we've been, where we are today, and where we hope to go. And I look forward to going there together. Thank you so much, all of you. I believe that's applause for the experience.
That's it, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. 7 minutes early.
Oh.